Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dungeons and Dice Rolls with Open Source Tools. I'd like to thank Gary for creating a game that many of us still enjoy and play today. And here's to celebrating a life well played. Role-playing games consist of players doing some role in some fictional settings. These players then interact with that setting. Their choices change and affect that setting. There's one person that creates and manages that settings for the players. It's called the Dungeon Master. It's what it was in the original RPG with Gary, or the DM, sometimes referred to generically as the Game Master or GM. This talk is focusing primarily on tabletop role-playing games. These traditionally and primarily are played with pencil and paper and a variety of polyhedral dice. There are different genres of role-playing games, mostly, having the differences really being like the setting, which influences the roles that the players themselves are doing. For example, there's Cyberpunk. This is Shadowrun, a long-running RPG. Sometimes it's in the far future, science fiction setting like Star Frontiers, where you can be some alien race or some just rando human. There's even post-nuclear war, post-apocalyptic games like Gamma World. I mean, who doesn't want to be a mutant, having two brains and interacting with sentient, people-sized rabbits? However, what I'm going to primarily talk about in this talk is my experience with the foundational role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons, specifically the Advanced Edition. It's also called the First Edition or 1E. So the players choose roles, like I said, or classes, and broadly speaking, within D&D, you could be a fighter, hacking, slashing, killing things. You could be a cleric or priest, be able to cast spells given to you from your deity. You can play a magic user, bending the rules of reality and blowing stuff up. Or you could be a thief willing to mug folks for their stuff. Now, the way the players interact with the setting is through encounters. Typically, these encounters involve combat. Sometimes it's solving a puzzle to get some form of treasure. And then those encounters will take place in a dungeon that's under a haunted keep. Or it could be an old and despotic city ruled by a cabal of wizards. So that's my quick little introduction to what RPGs are. Since I got back into gaming about just over a decade ago, I've been a DM. And so I have to create a whole bunch of ideas to keep the players happy. And I have to have lots and lots and lots of ideas, because you never know what players do. Even after you've been gaming with them for a long, long time, they will come up ways that'll surprise you and interact with your ideas that you don't expect. So by also having these ideas, you give the players options, and so they're not kind of railroaded down whatever idea or path you're giving them. It gives them a sense of agency and control. And so the software for my idea creation and retention is using mind map software and email. For mind mapping software, I like to use Freeplane. Mind mapping software lets you write down kind of ideas in no real order, and then you kind of branch off on those ideas. It's kind of like a brainstorming session. And this could also be used to keep track of events that happened in your game, specifically like about those ideas you had, and the reactions of the setting that the players did to interact with that encounter or whatever. And here's an example. This is a top level of a mind map from really early in my campaign. Just a couple ideas, the setting, specific where they are, who's the big bad currently, some more settings, some crazy thing in the setting, and then quickly you branch off from those ideas. Like these dwarves have all these things going on. You got these giants in this place. So it quickly becomes complicated. And this is like 5 levels deep in the mind map in terms of my ideas and what happened. So this is mostly a historical document for me. And it's nice to have the history because then I know what the players did in a specific spot. They might have interacted with what's called a non-player character, a person in the setting that is kind of significant. At least I try and make them significant. They may not be in terms of how the players use it. So then I know what that NPC might know based upon their interactions with the characters. A buddy told me when he thinks of ideas, he's typically not anywhere near someplace to easily jot some down. So he uses email. He sends himself emails about any random idea he has. And I've started doing that in terms of when I have ideas. I might be walking around, I might be just sitting on the bench, waiting for kids to get done running at the cross country. And for my email client, I'm using Thunderbird. On my phone, I'm using K9. And also, when you have these ideas, it's good to not just have what your idea is, or if you're reading Twitter and someone makes this comment about this weird room they see, to include how you might use that idea and how your players might see it. I'm still trying to figure out how to work this one in. So in addition to all these ideas, you got to think about where these encounters and ideas and the players interact, and that typically means maps. This is a section of the world setting of the system I use, and maps are really part and parcel of being a DM. For making maps, I like to use a tool called Inkscape. It's a scalar vector graphics, so when I make them, I don't have to worry about pixelization or the resolution of the map until I have to export into a JPEG or PNG file for the places that only accept those formats instead of SVG files. Here's an example of a level of a mega dungeon. A mega dungeon is layers and layers and layers of these maps. And with the digital map, I don't have to tape together a whole bunch of sheets of graph paper to draw it. There is some joy, to hand draw a map, but it's hard to make changes easily in terms of your erasing things and redrawing things. The players will have to, of course, use paper if they want to map it. And the scale I usually work at when I have my grid, I use like 5 squares to the inch. But also being digital, I don't have to worry about the size in terms of how big a paper it is. With that 5 squares to the inch scale, this would be would need a 22-inch by 34-inch piece of paper to map that. But it's just electrons on my computer. When you're making a mega dungeon map, you have many, many layers. And it's kind of nice sometimes to see how those layers interact to make sure this pit falls into this level, or these stairs go down to this level, but not this level. And I have little notes about scale to let me know how deep this stairway is, and how everything fits together. I could use something like a 3D CAD package for this, or maybe even an axonometric grid, but that sounds like work to me, and I'm lazy at heart, so I just make sure things work as they need. When players aren't busy raiding dungeons for treasures and killing the monsters, they need a place to hang out. And that means cities or towns. And so you make towns and cities for the players to hang out in. Because sometimes the encounters could happen there. They might need to talk to somebody about some kind of magic or treasure they found. This is a place called Stonebrook in the setting. And I just kind of, when I initially needed a town, I just made it willy-nilly. I just kind of placed buildings how I thought they would, how things made sense to me at the time. And recently I was talking to one of the guys that's in my campaign, talking about how to make cities, because I find cities really tedious. So I decided to do something even more tedious and think about how a city would grow over time. In this case, the city's been around about 300 years. How would I organically grow that city? Most graphics programs have this concept of layers. So I could have my original map in there and say, okay, cities typically start with a castle or keep. That's my kernel. Start there. Then I add, okay, there's people that are going to need a wall to protect them and places to live and a place to keep their food. No big thing. And with layers, you can hide and show different parts layers as you're working through it, kind of like, those when you see animators back in the day doing hand drawing, they'll flip back and forth to see things. So I can see where roads were, where I had them, where I think they should be now. Later in time, the city gets up here in a wharf area, so they got some commerce going on. Maybe they want to extend the walls to protect the merchants' goods and stuff like that. Maybe have like a little parade ground for the cavalry now that they got more people to protect. They need, more troops. And this is all of the layers all at once. This is my final phase where I think the wall should be. This is the wall where it was I initially made it, and all the roads where they were might be. Just it's a big mess, but it shows how with using digital tools you can easily reimagine and rework things and kind of edit things as you go. Sometimes you need to make your own graph paper because they don't always do what you want. In this case, I needed a hex within a hex within a hex. These big hexes here represent like 25 miles of territory. This is when I'm trying to imagine terrain. It's in the big map I showed you earlier, little snippet. It's general parts of the terrain. I'm trying to maybe be more specific, get more granular. And then inside that, there's these smaller hexes where they're 5 miles, so there's 5 hexes across roughly. So I can get finer detail. And inside that, there's these tiny little 1 mile hexes. That's if, I want to plot where the characters are in terms of they're slogging their way across a mountain or a marsh and trying to more accurately keep track of where they are within the map. This, you can't really see it because I did a hex within a hex. You can't really see it here. So you can kind of see it a little bit better here, just the resolution that doesn't show up. But I did the same thing. These are tiny, tiny little hexes so I can know where the characters are when they're traveling. Sometimes you have to deal with raster images. The maps you get are in PNG or JPEG. And so I use GIMP, the GNU image manipulation program, to do any editing or changing or extending of those files. Like for example, this is a map someone made of the area where Stonebrook is, to better show where like the swamps are, some forest and the hills. But he had something special in mind in this hex. I didn't, and I wanted to get rid of it. So I could use GIMP to choose the free select tool. Hey, there's a hex that's empty. Select it, copy, paste it, stick it over where that was. Hey, there's no more stupid little annotation. And while I was there, added some towns that are under the control of the Duke of Stonebrook, which is nice. So after I have all these maps, I want to know what's in them. So I need keys and notes, what's going on in those places. And for that, I use text files. And my editor of choice is Vim. And it's just, my style for these keys is really terse. Simple descriptions, I don't need walls of text. Very simple descriptions of the monsters or any treasure they might have. So no real form at the moment. And also I take notes as a player so I know what's happened, what the DM did to me in the game or information he passed along. And this is when I started thinking about, well, maybe I want to use Markdown in my my note taking, even in my keys. Markdown's I've been a late tech person in terms of if I'm going to do something that I want something nice and neat, I use LaTeX, but I've kind of slowly been won over by Markdown. It's still basically, it's kind of like Wiki. To me, it reminds me a lot of Wikitext, which I think it came from. And it does a really good job of being transformed into other formats, you know. And the example here from an article about Markdown for Dummies, you know, here's the Markdown, and it easily gets created this nice HTML. And once you have Markdown, you could use this tool called Pandoc, which takes the Markdown and it can not just transform to HTML, but to PDFs and EPUB. So you could create like a handout for the players, not just plain text, but a nice PDF file or an EPUB document. So enough digression. Another thing, DMs, especially in first edition, there's lots and lots and lots of tables you reference and roll on, you know, to maybe randomly create something the party encounters, or it's like, oh, they ran into some monster, let's see what kind of monster. So Rick created this tool called Roland to automate the rolling and resolution of those tables. And so far it just exists as a GitHub project. I've been kind of pushing him slowly to maybe cpanify it. He says, well, it's not that great software, and you know, but I disagree. It's great. I just want it to be cpanified so it's easier for other people to use. So let's look at how Roland is used. So monsters have loot, and they have this treasure type associated with them. They may have more than one. And you kind of roll to see how much different coins they have, gems and jewels. And for the most part, let's say we're just going to look at Class A treasure. This is pretty straightforward. There are subtables for gems and jewelry and magic. Here's the jewels subtable. There's different values of gems. This is the jewelry subtable, different values of jewelry. If there's magic items, it's another table. And then you go into that table and you get, you know, this is kind of like the entry of tables to roll on. And so what I did is I used Roland to I create the table so Roland can know what to do, and then rolled it. You know, assuming you're comfortable. You know, with computers, it's not that great a random number generator. Typically, depends how comfortable you feel with the entropy it has. And so I, you know, created Roland to roll on treasure tables for me, so I can just, you know, type roll treasure A, and here's the loot. And the thing about Roland is it's YAML. It's YAML all the way down, for the most part. And YAML's pretty cool. I like it. It's a nice human-readable data serialization language. I see it used a lot for configuration files. I use it for config files. And I'll note the founders. There's 3 founders of it. It's Clark Evans, Oren Ben Kiki, and one of our own mad scientists, Ingi.net. And that's nice because you have arrays, key hashes, and stuff like that. It even has Boolean stuff in it, which I don't use. And this is an example of a Roland table. Specifically, this is the table for that Class A treasure type. So these are just really arrays with some special syntax Rick put in. So, and what Roland does, it's going to execute each of these elements. And this one's saying, oh, you're going to look for a file, and that's going to be like another Roland table. Case in point, here's the magic table. And this is where his syntax he created. We're going to roll some dice. It's going to be D100 percentage. And based upon the rolls, if it's a 1 through 30, a 30% chance, which is what was in before, we're going to do this thing. We're going to roll a 1D1. This is my hack. I think I could do this better, but roll it 3 times, and on this result, you work on this one. Otherwise, nothing happens. So we go to the magic table. Here's what it looks like. So you basically roll your D100. Based on that, going to go to another table. And then this is that end terminating table of the various rods and wands and staves. And so now I created this command line program. And I didn't really want to have to walk someone through the install of a non-cpanified module. And I decided, well, I'll webify it. And for that, I chose the Mojo framework to do that. And instead of taking my already treasure table created Roland program, I took this other resource, which is encounter tables, basically ranting where you are in the world based on terrain, you can encounter stuff. And I converted this resource into a Roland table, a Roland application. And this is the tables in the encounter table. You basically have a location, you have these kind of encounter subtypes, and then based on the terrain it's at, you roll on another table. And so for this exercise, we're going to see what's happening in Alice Mercury as an encounter. And this is what it looks like on the map. So for me to figure out the terrain, that looks like a mountain. But there's a gazetteer in the rules that tells me, okay, Alice Mercury, oh, it's not just a mountainous island, it's an extinct volcano. So, hey. And so this is the volcanic terrain map with the different subtypes of encounters. And say, we get a natural encounter and, hey, I roll a fever. What's that encounter look like? PC gets a fever for some number of days. So I took that whole list of tables and I made Roland tables out of it. Same thing. Dice, results, and based if you know the location and the terrain, like I said, we're on the volcanic terrain type, roll on this, and fever. This is the entry for what the fever looks like. In my program, I try to process all these rolls. If I find something that looks like a roll, I'll try and process that. Excuse me. And this is a kind of a fun exercise because this is what really got me to learn how to create dispatch tables, so I could keep calling the dispatch table as I try to keep processing tables and tables and tables. So now I have a command line program to do the encounter. I webified it, which is basically some routes. It's, here's the top level. There's many menu entries. Here's Alice Mercury. Click on that, and then it's like I had to go through and choose what terrain types are associated with each location. So we got a volcano and the fever. As you notice, there's no 2d6 here. I was able to process that and make an actual result. So to say, one of the characters gets a fever for 4 days. And then you get to, make them think that they're dying or something like that and have to deal with that disease. They think it's a disease. So, not content to do that, I thought my son wanted me to run a game for his friends, and I didn't want them for their first session to roll up a character, so I thought, okay, I'll pre-generate some characters. And then I thought, well, what if I make an app that does that so other people in the gaming community I'm a part of can use this app to generate characters for like conventions. A lot of my friends go to conventions and run games, and you don't want people in the convention to spend time making characters. So but I also don't want all these DMs to spend a lot of time, filling out sheets. Even though there's form fillable sheets for them to use for the characters, it's still time to type even all that in. So I created a program to generate character sheets based upon just the stats for the characters, its class and its level, and it'll spit out a PDF. So I was hoping that with as little effort as possible, you can create most of the data you needed for characters. So once again, Mojo just had some drop-down menus or a text area they can enter the information, and it'll spit out a poorly hard to see PDF file with all the information. There's like 4 pages of information to fill out, and I try and fill out as much of that as possible for the characters or in the DMs. I'm mostly satisfied with it. It's doing okay. Post conference, I'll probably put more work into it. So throughout all of this, I use Git to track changes. It's I don't have to do it because it's just me, but I like to do it because then I could, especially with my SVG files, I can roll back changes I've made in my map. It's like, crap, I didn't want that. Try to have meaningful commit messages. You know, this is from my the log for my rework of that Stonebrook City. So this one really isn't a tool I use, but it does make possible the things I like to do in terms of the games I play. The OGL, or the Open Game License, was created by the Wizards of the Coast, the people that currently own the trademark and copyright for Dungeons & Dragons. They did this in 2000 to license portions of their 3rd edition game to kind of help amp up third-party people to publish material for the game. You know, they created this system reference document. And out of this simple need for them, a whole plethora of game systems emerged because they decided, okay, this stuff is intellectual property. You can't touch this, but this other stuff, knock your stuff out. You can use these mechanics and go. And one of the my first interfaces with this was Osric. There's a bunch of guys that like first edition. First edition, if you've ever read the books, especially the Dungeon Master's Guide, it's kind of a mess and organization. So they created this old school reference and index compilation, which took as much as you could under the OGL and put it under one book in terms of trying to organize it and index it, you know, which is why the index compilation. And this is a pretty good reference if you want to do something that's pretty close to first edition D&D. Another one, Labyrinth Lord. This is a clone of basic AD&D. I came into this because I'm in a game that Rick Cygnus runs, and it's basic, but it uses Labyrinth Lord, you know, as a way to expand upon what basic D&D has. And out of this also came what the game I currently use most is this Hyperborea, or more formally, the Astonishing Swordsman, Sorcerers of Hyperborea. I like this system because, you know, it takes first edition and basic, mashes them together, and kind of polishes the edges off. And then there's tons and tons and tons of gaming systems that use the OGL to do cool stuff and different ideas. Another tool I use, like I say, this is really less open source, is called Roll20. It's hard, especially as I got older and had kids and busy with life. It's really hard to have face-to-face games. We all sit around the same table and play. Roll20 makes it easy in terms of people don't have to be physically near each other. They can kind of sit around the computers and play games together, D&D games. You know. These are some of the games. You know, this is a game. This is Rick's game. This is a game I'm in. This is my current online game. I ran a Traveler game a long time ago, and then I have when I'm trying to do things in Roll20. Roll20 has, I wouldn't call it open source, but they definitely have shared resources that make available. The big one is character sheets. People create character sheets to use in the various games people play on Roll20. 5e, 5th edition Dungeon Dragons gets lots of support. People write API scripts to do cool things within Roll20 in terms of the map area and actions. I've contributed a little bit. You know, like I say, I ran a classic Traveler game, and I wanted to try my hand at creating a character sheet and use it in Roll20. So that was fun. So in summary, for idea creation and retention, I like to use mind map software, and for that, it's Freeplane. I email myself ideas, so I use email, primarily Thunderbird. If you're creating maps, towns, cities, whatever, I like to use Inkscape primarily, and GIMP when I have to. For maps, keys, and notes, I use a text editor, Vim specifically. Starting to use Markdown more. Eventually use Pandoc because I have a crazy idea for my character sheet that uses Pandoc. And for session tools, I like to use Roland for automating a lot of the table stuff. So I don't have to spend 5-10 minutes rolling something up or determining, oh, this ogre had all this loot, or this magic item, why wasn't use this magic item? I can do it quickly beforehand and maybe take advantage of that. I use YAML not just besides Roland, but in terms of config files and somehow I organize some of the data I enter and use. Mojo want to take my command line tools and want to share them online with people. I use Git for my change management to track my changes, of course. OGL, I'm a secondary consumer of because all the gaming systems I like to use are primarily OGL. And Roll20 because, you know, we're all busy and it's not easy always to get together and play face to face. Thank you. I'm GIZMO Math Mo, just about anywhere on the internets. Thank you. Any questions? I'll take comments. I don't care.
Yeah. One of the things you were talking about layers.
Yes.
And one of the great uses for layers that I found, especially with using Google Hangouts to do, because nobody can be in the same room anymore.
Yep.
I could project up my screen with a layer that was completely black sitting on top of the map.
Right.
And I could simulate the fog of war and either move the transparent hole around as
Right.
their torch moving around in
Yep.
the dungeon. Or if they're actually mapping, I could just...
Right. Well, it's also, you can create handouts. I have my dungeon. I don't want, if I want to hand something out, you know, I'm lazy. Here's the map of the dungeon. Won't show them secret doors and any hidden things. I could just say, hide those layers, print it out. Here you go, guys. Knock yourself out. So yeah, layers are, once I got the hang of layers and started using them, it's great in terms of what you can do, in terms of creating, never mind in game to do things with that. So, anything else you'd like to know? Anything I missed? Come on, it's D&D, man. We have opinions. Questions about how I could have done stuff better? I don't know. You sure? That's it? Yes, Walt.
One thing I was thinking, instead of emailing yourself when you have ideas, which, you know, it certainly works, but I know I know this is in the Apple ecosystem, might not be in the Android ecosystem.
Yeah.
There's one program called Drafts where it's
Okay.
just, it's on iOS and you can write whatever you want and you can, there's all kinds of options. You can send an email from there, you can append it to a Dropbox file if you want to do that, so that's another way.
Yeah, there's lots of great ways. It's like I said, I never thought about using email as a way to like, oh, I have this idea. I need a way to capture it. I don't have a pen and paper, or screw it, I'll email. It's a great way. Plus, depending on the tool, email's nice because I could do a search. If I tag everything game ideas, I can find all my game ideas and grab them and take them from an email and then put them in something else.
Do you put like something in the subject or something so you can find them?
Yeah, that's what I try and remember to at least put game idea in the subject and maybe something else. I mean, that way I can quickly search. I mean, because
then you're kind of using
tagging
Gmail or whatever as your database.
Right. Yeah. I try and.
You can do if you're using Gmail is after your username, you can put a plus sign and anything, and then the app.
Yep.
And then you can build filters off of that thing. So yeah, I have a notes thing, and anything I email to myself, plus notes goes into my notes folder.
Yep.
It doesn't even touch my inbox.
Yeah, it's just a general work. No matter, it doesn't have to be gaming related. It's just finding ways to capture ideas. Like I said, I have my smartphone on me, and I just use, say, Canine Mail as my email client. But like I say, it could be just easily some other app. There's tons of note-taking apps. I mean, there's also mind map apps for smartphones, but it's really hard to do mind maps on a small screen.
And there even are like dictation apps where
I could
you go for a walk and say hey Dingus, remind me to do this. Like this would be a good idea, and it just saves it somewhere.
Yeah, it's just like I say, it's and especially for stuff like, so I'm not a big 5e player, even 3.5. Well, especially 3.5, it's such there's lots of mechanics in there, so there's lots of tools to help people with that, especially on Roll20. Roll20 has a lot of tools created for people in, say, 5th edition games or 3.5, or games that are really what they call crunchy. There's lots of rules and stuff and permutations for classes and stuff. So, but yeah, it's like I was a big analog guy, making maps by hand. But then, what really flipped me into digital was when I was making that town, and it's like drawing it, and it's like I wanted to change where something was, and that's really a pain to do on pencil and paper. I could make a photocopy and start over and erase out or whatever. But with digital, it's electrons. I don't care. Delete. And then with Git, I have versions of that I could go back to if I wanted to. Or just have, say, tons of layers or my edits. It's like map 1, map 0, map 3. So. Anything else?
Yeah, where
Yes.
can I find more info on Roland?
The what?
Roland.
Roland? That's on GitHub. Yep, it's it's a RJBS. Let me go back.
I mean, Rick probably has about 1,000 things on GitHub.
Well, I'd say if you do,
If you just search for RJBS Roland,
Yeah,
you get the repo and the blog post.
yeah, this is RGBS Roland. So yeah, I really want him to cpan. I mean, I can put some work in and put a pull. I might have put a pull request in a couple years ago to say, hey Rick, this.
There's a pull request.
Yeah, there's a pull request for me to, actually, can we go look at it? To say, hey Rick, I think this is what you need, the minimum need to do to make it CPAN submittable, But I'm not going to push him because, it's Rick. I'm not going to, it's his code. But I really like Roland just because, like I say, I can make tables. And like I say, for that PC Gen, PDF script, there's not a lot of code there. It's just I had to enter all of the information from the gaming system for characters into those tables. It was like 21,000 lines of text. I mean, short lines, but still text. So. All right. No more comments, no more questions? Yes?
It gave me an evil gaming idea.
That my players have learned, and I let them
Yeah.
talk when they're figuring things out, and they'll say something. It's like, oh, that's a great. I mean, because they will always think about when I present them with a challenge or else.
Because, what you're talking about, because it's easy to change things, I'm just thinking how cool it would be if the characters went off an adventure and came back to their hometown and something had radically changed about it, which usually you don't bother to do because you've already got your maps, they're already drawn out, you're not going to suddenly tear down their buildings and put up different ones.
Yeah.
That would be actually.
Yeah, it's really digital is really fungible. It's like I don't care. So yeah, because like I said, I mean, players will say things, they'll have ideas of how things are happening. It's like, that's a great idea, and it really pisses them off when I say that because oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to use that, and then they realize
DM is a bad DM.
I try not to be. Like I say, I don't kill your characters. I just create the opportunities for your characters to kill themselves. So.
The system I play in Pendragon, they actually have a rule that if you make the game master laugh, you're supposed to get the experience with.
I love it when my players, like I say, I love it I was talking to one of my friends that's in my game. It's like, DMing is kind of like anthropology, because I know perfectly how the setting is or the problem presented to them, and then I get to see what they're thinking as they're trying to solve it or walk down that path. It's like, what are you guys thinking? I mean, I don't say it out loud. It's like, what are you thinking? And it's like, okay, I'm just a kind of a semi-interested bystander as they're going through this world. And it's just like I'm sitting there, watching a pack of monkeys doing whatever. I mean, it's fun. So and I'm a big believer in Rule 0. If it's not fun, why are you doing it? So if that's it, like I say, remember Rule 0, have fun, and remember Gary, and celebrate a life well played. Thank you very much.